Hello, and thank you for watching my video. I am Mikei the Mighty, and today we're doing Mikei Talk, and I am here with JiggyJoe
How goes it?
and also Xerokitsune.
Greetings.
And we're going to be just doing a little bit of general discussion, talking about where Guild Wars 2 is right now in terms of gameplay, because the reason why I've decided to do a little podcast video on this is generally it's one of those things. We're actually having a lot of our guildies, and I've actually had a couple of mails from other players telling me that they're actually stopping playing Guild Wars 2. And a lot of people are actually getting to that point where it's not really doing it for them anymore. And this is a video talking about why that is. So does anyone want to start me off as to why you've... first of all, are you getting a little bit tired of Guild Wars 2? Because I admit, I am really struggling for motivation to play GW2 right now.
I've been feeling a little drag-off-ish. It's mostly because I'm logging in, I'm doing my flax farm, and I've gotten most of my masteries done. I've unlocked all of the elite specializations on my characters.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I come from a very similar aspect. I haven't done all as much as you guys, admittedly, but I've done what I've enjoyed and have wanted to do. As a PvE player, I've explored the maps, to their full extent and done the adventures and experienced the Heart of Thorn story, and unlocked, not all of the 100% of the elite specializations, but I've played them, in PvP quite a bit, and I agree that it's gone to and become a kind of just like a grind fest to where you need to sit in these maps, do the rotations and the events to unlock currencies, to unlock more stuff, basically. And it's grindy and it's tedious. Basically, that's basically what a lot of the expansion pack is, and there's not a lot to do. It's a very small amount of content spread very thin.
There's a decent depth in some of the storyline pieces, but due to the time gating, I'm normally missing most of one that I actually enjoy, so it's kind of weird that way.
I mean, yeah, you can approach it from several different angles. Regarding collections, where you're required to get a lot of tokens. I mean, take the machined weapons, for example, that you need to get your elite specialization weapon. That you need like a certain amount of airship parts, certain amount of leyline crystals, certain amount of like Aurelium, and so that you're forced to do certain maps to actually get those in your collections. And I don't mind that. I always assumed that you would have collections that would focus on the long term, so that players that would continue to play it, they actually have something to strive for. But, again, I agree with the fact that there's a lack of content, and, a majority of people did complete Heart of Thorns, like the story within the first 2 weeks. And that was people taking it very just gently slow, because there were a few time-gated things, as you said, Zero. But what is it that's now, there's not been many updates. We've had a couple of festivals. Obviously, we've had the raids come in, but we've had PvP leagues. But generally, I think the problem is a lot of the game types aren't in fantastic mode right now. Like they introduced raids, and raids are in a good place, but it's the same thing over and over again. It's still like a very small section. And obviously, when they bring out the next raid wing, it'll bring a few people back in. PvP. Well, if I make a quick point about just the general state, PvP is actually, in my opinion, was in a better place with pro leagues and the league systems, even though it wasn't perfect. And then it's during this off season, it's kind of really like gone in a bad place. And then World versus World is a complete mess, but they are trying to fix it. But yeah, it wasn't ready for Heart of Thorns. So I don't play World versus World really. PvP I haven't played much since the league stopped. And PvE, you know, I've got a legendary weapon. I got the new Hope. I played the raid. I'm really getting bored with fractals, doing that every day. It's a real struggle to like, okay, what do I go for? You know, what is it that keeps me playing apart from, you know, legendary armor? I mean, you know, the legendary back piece for the fractals, which isn't even out yet. There's just a lot of unfinished things right now, and I'm like, well, what's the point of me even doing it when I can't even, you know, get the whole armor set?
Well, I've still yet to fight in the raids, and I generally haven't done that much fractals because my AR is still way too low for that type of thing. But I've been mostly doing the outside world content, and it's lots of fun as long as I've got hours to kill on it.
Like, for example, the JiggyJoe,
which is fantastically interesting, especially with all of the different directions and different paths, except you have to have the time to dedicate into it. But that's also much like the raids. You need a significant amount of time to dedicate into it to be able to get involved in that as well.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that's a pretty big theme with this expansion pack, and I think that's something that they took a little too far, is that they pushed the end game theme a little bit too hard, and they did it in a kind of a poor manner, in which they said, hey, we need some end game content, but they turned it more so into, as I said before, you know, grind and collections, and just not a lot of whole lot of content to hand out for that. You know, you can only do the same events so many times before you're like, you know what, this isn't all that great. You know, it's like you said, it's becoming a struggle to find the motivation to do things anymore, because what it's become is a chore. That's what a lot of people are saying. This game has kind of just become a chore, you know. And the point of video games in general, MMOs, is for entertainment, to have fun. You know, if you have a small amount of content, you know, that's okay as long as it's engaging and fun. But what happens is you have a small amount of content that's kind of shallow, and then you're kind of forced to do it over and over and over again to progress to any further, and that's their quote-unquote endgame content. I think you kind of have an issue there.
I would also think that if you compare the game pre-Heart of Thorns to post-Heart of Thorns, there's also several other issues that I think have affected people's general gameplay. So when we look at, if we ignore PvP and World versus World pre-Heart of Thorns, what we're going to talk about is several things in actual what people used to do. So if we talk about what Heart of Thorn before Heart of Thorns, people's general like daily activities. So you would log on pre-Heart of Thorns. What would you do?
I would do my dailies, and I would run dungeons.
Yep.
As well as knock out any achievements or extra content, and then also work on other characters. I guess that's what I would do.
Zero?
For me, I would do my dailies, mine the nodes in my home instance, and then at that point, I just kind of wander off and find something interesting happening on one of the maps and go forth.
Yeah. Whereas I would say for me, again, you do your dailies. I would also I'd do a Silver Waste chest run, where you're obviously getting a big Zerg and just go around opening chests. I would probably do a Fractal run, which would probably between 45 minutes to an hour of me doing 3 Fractals, then the final Fractal. So that was, something that it was quite a bit of a time investment, but you got a kind of a bit of a payoff at the end. And again, dungeons, you do AC run, a Sorrow's Embrace run, maybe a Citadel of Flame. If you are looking to do the Ara runs, again, I don't think I really ever bothered with the Ara runs. But let me ask you this: when was the last time you did a story mode dungeon?
Several years. I did the initial runs, and it's been probably 2 years, give or take, a few months extra as well. That's primarily because there's no real pull to do it other than introduction to new players.
Yeah, and what I'm going to say is that what the difference between Heart of Thorns, the pre and post Heart of Thorns, is not just people will say okay that it's getting a bit stale, but you look in what we actually do now in the game. Okay, so I've talked about what we do before Heart of Thorns. What do you do now when you log in? What are the things that you do in game? If you've got like an hour to play, what would you do?
Well, first of all, let me start by saying that I don't even have the motivation to play for an hour when I log in daily, unless there's someone else on that will help me kind of drag my hand to do it. I will log on and I will do my dailies, and I will. That's pretty much it. I guess other than maybe if I didn't get that raid clear that week, I'll try and push for a raid group. But what'll end up happening most of the time is me sitting and looking for a group for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and hoping that someone will pick me up because raids aren't an accessible thing right now. So yeah, dailies and raids, kind of.
And Zero?
Well, actually, back to the dungeon story, I just did one lately actually, I've done a couple lately because we've gotten some new guild members who are new to the game, so I've been helping them through them. But as to actual, what would I do with an hour? That, I hate to say it, but that actually goes with my daily rotation. It takes me nearly 45 minutes to get the flax farms done on my characters because I go to the two primary flax farm locations on each of the characters on my account that's able to reach them. And by the time I've done that, because I've got a fair amount of level 80 characters, one of each class plus an additional two, that takes about 40-ish minutes right there.
But are you classifying that as your dailies?
No, that's what
okay.
I do during my daily, and then I try to clip through the dailies themselves, at least bare minimum 3 to be able to get the daily, get it to clear off the board.
Yep. This is a point that I think is making the game much less enjoyable. How people make gold in the game. And generally now, farming materials, resources, nodes, is the best way to make gold. And you're not even having fun doing that. That isn't fun. Doing dungeons was fun. Getting a gold from running through Citadel of Flame, Ascalon Catacombs. You're actually playing the game. You're defeating monsters. And that's actually how, the game is designed. You would fight a boss, kill him, get some gold. Look at AC, like the Lord, Cola, Lieutenant Cola, defeating the Gravelings, etc. But that actually taught us a lot in how to actually become a good Guild Wars 2 player. Now, if you, for example, I'm just stepping away from the gold environment in terms of actually learning the game. For a new player, it's much more difficult because you would go from actual PvE content to you might go into fractals, but that is a much more substantial jump up. Then from fractals to raids is an even bigger leap now. So from that point of view, I don't think it's much as beneficial. And I think for players who want to earn gold, even the Silver Waste chest farm was a pretty dreary thing to do. And the fact that now it's actually better to just press F and open some, open nodes. Even like the Silver Waste farms, just pressing F anyway.
The Silver Waste farm boring. Had at least some things to it. If you were doing the Silver Waste farm, yeah, you press F half the time when you're doing the champ train, but to be able to get your bandit crest and the keys to be able to do that, you had to run some events. Whereas
Sure, yeah.
the only requirement to be able to do press F to farm this node is to go somewhere to any one of the NPCs that sells the sickle or have one of the unlimited sickles, and you're good to go.
Well, I'm just gonna actually show people like I'm actually going to go in my character screen. So I've just logged out. I've got 25 characters. Okay, so I'm going to start at the very right hand side of my bar. I have only one non-level 80 character, and the reason is because it's I was doing a leveling challenge. So I've got a thief that's actually doing the story. He's in Auric Basin right now, and he will, because Auric Basin has a lot of ancient wood planks, ancient wood trees, so I'll go and farm there. I have an elementalist that's in Brisbane Wildlands doing the iron ore farm, which, you know, is very, very popular right now. I've got a Zerk warrior that's doing flax farm. I've got a character that's PvP only. Another one who's just in PvP but is doing flax farm. I've got another one doing a platinum farm because platinum's getting a bit expensive. Another one doing, what's it called, the iron ore farm. 1, 2, 3 characters doing flax farm. 1 doing a potato farm. 1 doing a strawberry farm for this is basically for the scribing. 1 doing, again, the iron ore. I've got 2 in ore doing the elder wood farm in Malcor's Leap. I've got my character that's just in one of the cities. Another 2 doing the flax farm. Another 1 in Auric Basin doing the ancient wood farm. I've got another character who's just in Divinity's Reach. Another PvP. And then 1 doing Tangled Depths, who's there just for the meta. And another, my main character, who's actually just in Verdant Brink doing the flex farm. And another 1 in Verdant Brink doing the flex farm. And that's just, you know, my characters are pretty much in exactly the same place. I don't have anyone, you know, oddly enough, in any of the Norn area.
In my case, my 11 characters bounce between the 2 flax farm locations, because half the time I'm selling the oil to be able to make a small amount of money, or I'm going to it since I do a good fair chunk at scribing, and pretty much without the flax oil, you're not doing any scribing.
Yep.
Exactly.
And let me chime in here really quick, just for kind of a funny note here. If you closed your eyes and listened to basically all of what you just said and listed, you could have fooled me into thinking that you were playing a farming simulator or like Farmville on like Facebook. I'm not even joking. If you took someone who didn't know what Guild Wars 2 was, and you had them listen to what you just said, they would have no idea what Guild Wars 2 was. They wouldn't even think it was an MMO. And that is, I feel, a very, very bad thing, because I think what people want to see and hear when they think of an MMO or Guild Wars 2 is like a epic scale, you know, MMO. You know, epic is like a big word that I heard on launch.
Yeah.
That was tossed around a lot, because that's kind of what it was. It was expansive. It was, you know, you had Zaitan, a Lumen threat that you didn't ever see, but you could feel his presence basically, you know, everywhere. He was just like that boogeyman. And it was an epic scale, you know.
Let me ask you this: why do you think that farming and pressing F is now? What has been the reason for that being the primary source of gold, as opposed to how it was pre-Heart of Thorns?
Because the game has become a massive gold sink. People don't have the time to dedicate to actually farm in the resources itself, because it requires so much to actually progress, to build like ascended gear, to craft ascended gear, or to craft certain items in the game to progress your character. People don't have the time to spend actually gathering it. So what they'll do is they'll actually buy gold with their actual cash, and buy the resources or buy the items themselves.
As to part of the gold sink, for instance, the flax oil, one of the primary things that I sell at this point or use, it's the two primary sinks of it consists of scribing, which is a massive gold sink all on its own, and it's used in half the upgrades for the guild halls. If you look at it, anything that requires the empty keg or anything that requires the actual oil itself, which a good chunk of your guild hall upgrades did, required obscene amounts of flax seeds to be able to make the oil, to be able to make the kegs, or to be able, yeah.
Yep. And I feel it's just that it's not that it's supply and demand. That's not the issue that's going on here, because that's what really drives a healthy economy, is that, items that, the supply is lower and demand is higher, so the price will be more expensive. That's understandable. That's how economy works. But what we have ArenaNet doing is releasing items that are really difficult to make with lots and lots of necessities for a small amount of mats, and that requires a lot of gold. Like, I mean, you could probably pop into like any crafting station and look at like a simple ascended item and look at how many mats that requires, or even scribing. Scribing's an even better example. Go to the scribing stations and look at how much flax you need to craft like specific oils or stuff like that, or like stuff needed for upgrades specifically for guild halls. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of specific mats.
And I think that, what I'm impressed with is I was expecting you guys to go, oh, okay, they nerfed dungeons as one of the primary sources of gold. They did that, but that wasn't actually one of the main reasons why the economy has changed so much. And what you've both said is absolutely correct. The guild halls have really shaken up the economy completely, not just in linseed oil. If you look at how much elderwood you need, how much mithril you need, you're talking thousands and thousands, like 10,000 of mithril ingots and elderwood planks, thousands of linseed oil, and other things as well. And eventually the economy will balance out. But what I find interesting was when we had Winter's Day and you could exchange, you could get gifts that would give you linseed oil. The linseed oil economy did actually crash a bit, which made it a lot more achievable. And what ArenaNet did is, if you look at what it was like, particularly we were talking about ascended items, to actually craft an ascended item was actually cheaper back prior to Heart of Thorns. And because the economy was unbalanced, if you look at leather, spiritwood planks, Deldrimore steel ingots, bolts of damask, they were wildly different prices, and now they balanced it out, which, it's understandable, but it's also made things a lot more expensive, which has inflated the economy. And you did have, after a while, quite a lot of gold come into the economy, and I did think it needed balancing, but they've gone completely over the top, and now there are so many things that are so expensive. All right. In another year or so, we may say, okay, these items are a lot more cheaper because the items have flooded the economy. Hell, you look at our guild hall, right? We're level 50. We've completed the mine, we've completed the workshop, we've completed the tavern, but we've got every upgrade that you can get. So we're not going to actually be spending any of those resources anymore. So therefore, the economy might start to balance out. But that's something that you could look at.
There's only two things I would bring to this. One, a reason why the economy will balance down a little bit better, but the question is, does the economy balance out before the player base dissipates? And if the player base dissipates before the economy balances out, that means the economy's not going to fully balance out, because as soon as those players come back with whatever the heck else new draw fill-in-the-blank rolls in, whether it's another raid wing or the next expansion or whatever that may be, they come back, they look at their guild, assuming they're still in it, or if they owned it, what's going on with it at that time. And then they're going, oh, well, I need to push in upgrades to it now. And then once again, we go back into all of the materials sink out of the economy. The
Yeah.
the other
I was going to
oh,
say, go on, go.
the other thing is when they did the rebalancing for ascended armors, the way they rebalanced it was they went, okay, for ascended armors, yeah, the damask was kind of painful, so we'll solve that by making leather equally painful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I also feel like they didn't do justice and service to add in content in other areas and lacking in others. So like, for instance, like they added flax seeds, they added like linseed oil or whatever, certain mats and certain new items. But I think they needed to add more like ores. Like specifically, they needed to add like a certain, maybe another tier of ore that might have made it a little bit easier, so that we weren't buying so much mithril, so much iron ore, stuff that was already existed, stuff that was used for like ascended items or specific items in general. Um, so we have all this, like just like mithril and iron ore that we need to use, but we need to figure out where we are allotting them to. So like you have like ascended gear, and then you've got guild halls, and then you have miscellaneous whatever, like legendary weapons. Legendary weapons is I don't even want to get into that right now. Like the new legendary weapons, like the grind needed
Well,
for that.
so actually, the legendary weapons are a fantastic source of gold sink right there, because those things, not only are they pulling out the mithril, but they're also pulling out the ascended materials at the same time.
Yeah, but those are also for the
Well,
people who have time to do that.
yeah, well, let me. We've talked about obviously the economy wise and why the actual we're struggling to play because earning gold isn't as interesting for playing the game. Obviously we talked about prior to Heart of Thorns. If you wanted to make a quick few gold, you would go on and do a few dungeons. Let's actually talk about what one of the main issues I'm finding right now is what is there to look forward to for Guild Wars 2 right now in 2016.
Um,
Theoretically, Raid Wing, but I think I've mentioned before a few times, I still have yet to actually fight. You guys were nice enough to bring me into the raid so I could look around the dead place, but I have actually never seen really anything other than the tiny little pocket raptors on the other shore alive in there.
yep. And for me personally, very little. I mean, what they've this is okay. I'll chime in on this really quickly, and I don't know if I'll dip into it again later on in the talk. But the communication with ArenaNet is abysmal, and so what they've said, and what they've have been releasing is they'll release a guild chat every Friday, and they'll tease something here and there, a little bit here and there, and maybe show off one or two minor things that are like interesting. So you don't even need to watch the guild chat. You can just read the Dolphy notes on Reddit, or whatever.
Yeah, just to quickly interrupt, I will say Guild Chat really has become a lot less interesting to watch in the last month or so. Again, I used to watch it every single week. Now again, you're right. I'll just read the Dolphy
Yeah,
notes.
there's literally no reason to watch it because it's 95% awkward talk filler, mixed with showing off the developers on their high horses, acting like they think that they're fixing the game constantly with with minor tweaks here and there, and that's okay. Like I like developers. I like giving them credit where it's due. But what we have is lots of PR talk and hush hush going on. Um, so that people don't get so either people don't get saddened by the lack of their content that they're releasing, or so they don't overstretch their boundaries, so they don't bite more than they can chew. um, On top of that, though, it's a matter of they have guild chat, they have Twitter, and then they have the blog posts. Other than that, they don't listen or communicate with us at all, and it's just abysmal.
They have their internal forums where they communicate as well, though.
Yes, but also to that, it's just like they'll respond to select few, and it's a matter of even to when they respond, they'll just be like, oh, it's not able to achieve at this point, or it's too difficult, or yeah, this is something that we could probably approach in the future. Um, but that's all we'll ever get. And then when we get patch notes, when we get updates, I'm talking about core game updates. Um, we know little to nothing about Living World Season 3, and it's 5, almost 6 months, I believe, after Heart of Thorns.
And you know what? You're actually probably going to get more information from that shaman's data mining. Prior to Heart of Thorns, we
Yes,
learned a lot more.
sh-
Even though it's unofficial, it's still it gets that buzz going and that excitement.
exactly, and that's what they need to do. Like, I don't care what contract ArenaNet signed where they're not able to talk about anything at all, period. But I don't care about, like, for instance, like Zero talked about how he isn't able to do any of the raid wings. All they've talked about for the past few weeks, almost a month, is golden chickens in Terrir and a giant sloth raid boss. And then they're like, oh yeah, they're like, they teased and they were gonna talk about the new raid wing, but all they showed was the sloth laying down, and then they talked about how cute it was and how scary it was and how it was in nightmares, haha, joking around, filler talk, etc., etc. And then they, you know, that's all it was, and that's all we have right now. We don't know anything else. I mean, they gave us kind of like a very, very like strict 2016 roadmap, but it's so broad that there's really no general direction. We have no idea where they're going with this. We have no details. We have no hype around it. So basically, we're sitting here in a content drought, just kind of wondered when are they gonna show us something magical that'll get our attention again. But I also feel
So
like it's kind of too late.
what would you want then? What would you like Arena to say? Okay, right. This is 2016. We're working on a new expansion. We don't know when it's going to be out yet because obviously, it's a brand new expansion. Theoretically, you'd say 12 to 18 months. All right, we're going to fill you in with Living World. We're working on Living World Season 3. It will be out in 2016, probably the quarter 3 or quarter 4. Would that be something satisfying to know that that's going to be out? And then what would that do? Would you, be motivated, or is that the sort of communication you'd expect or want?
Yes and no. I feel like ArenaNet kind of done goofed to to say the least when it comes to their expansion. I feel like mid season two, but also I feel like do you remember that event that they had with the mod room throughout the
Oh god, where you had to go around and tag as many events as
yes,
possible for like little
yes,
tiny
yes,
reward.
sir.
Yeah.
And I feel like they I felt very saddened by what they did with that event, and I felt that was also kind of a glimpse as to what we were going to be seeing with the expansion pack, which kind of because you had the development and all that jazz. Um, and that made me really sad because it was poorly developed and designed on so many fronts. The fact that it actually was released in general was just outstanding. Like how they like why. And also in the time period at which the game became free to play, so that was the kind of the first taste of which all those new free to players saw and left because it just wasn't interesting. But we just don't know anything about that content and the fact that what we got, how little talk for this expansion pack, and what they've promised with the expansion pack, and we haven't even gotten yet. And the fact that they're already talking about another expansion pack. Um, I don't think so. I think I'd probably abandon this game completely by the time that they are even considering that. Considering the amount of content that they released for this expansion pack, I'm just not interested in another expansion pack right now.
For me, I find it they set a very high expectation the first go round. When they started the concept of living story season 1 and season 2, yeah, season 1 started out kind of train wreck slow, but within less than 6 months, they gave us South Sun. They completely shifted some of the maps over a bit. Well, not physically shifted, but they changed some of the dynamics of big, wide swatches of the landscape. And now I understand they're moving towards the more repeatables, so that they can't actually go, well, this zone's under attack for this next couple of weeks, or anything fun like that. But we've gone a while with pretty much the only thing happening of, well, there's this personal story you got in Heart of Thorns, there's the metas that are floating around, and here's part 1 of the raid. We're working on PvP seasons, and World vs. World, yeah, that didn't go so well. We're going to try again sometime. And it goes, soon, trademark. And everything goes into the soon trademark bin. And
yes. Lots of hype, or not hype, I'm sorry. Completely the wrong word to use. Lots of PR talk. Lots of just straight out PR talk. And it's not even interesting PR talk. It's just them saying, we'll talk about that at a later date. And even the stuff that we're asking, it's not even like interesting or fun stuff to talk about. It's just kind of like fixes and changes that need to be done to the game. That's what they're thinking is going to be fun. And what I think is a draw to the game for me personally originally was coming back to those monthly Live in World updates, because it was a decent amount of chunk of new engaging content that they would release, and it felt like it was part of the story.
And
again, you've got the you've got this kind of weird thing now that people, well, obviously when they launched Guild Wars 2, then they brought in this Living World strategy where they would bring in updates like you mentioned, South Sun Cove, which gave us a new map. Probably a little bit, it was their first try at it. It was kind of plonked in the middle. Then you got Dry Top, and obviously you had Season 1 where, as Zero mentioned, they changed things like the Marionette fight, which was a fantastic fight, in my opinion.
Fantastic, yes.
And I felt, the problem they had with Living World Season 1, it was on the fly. They've realised, okay, they want people to go back and be able to replay it, so that, they did that with Living World Season 2. You can actually buy it even though you haven't played it. They can't do that yet with Living World Season 1 because it changed things. Look at, what was it, Flame and Frost, which changed the... what's the starter zone? Wayfarer Foothills for the Norn. They added in portals for the Molten Alliance coming in. And then you had Keswick's Hills with the Nightmare Tower. And that was, again, something really, really cool. But
and the multi-zone invasions where Scarlet's Aether minions would drop in and just take over an entire area. And you couldn't do anything else other than fight their minions there.
Here, look at Lion's Arch. I love the Lion's Arch, the battle for Lion's Arch. I mean, I'd love to play that again. That would be really cool if they could bring that back. But again, while this was going on, people were still going, oh, it's Living World, when are they going to do an expansion? And that got even louder during the Season 2. And people were clamoring for an expansion. We've got the expansion, and now what are people clamoring for? Well, where's Living World Season 3? It would have been, I think they probably, they are trying to balance out their strategy with having some Living World updates with an expansion at the same time, which means obviously it's kind of taking work, the Living World team are taking a bit more time to build and Living World Season 3. But I think that, obviously we can't have both things. We can't have, we go, all right, we want the expansion, and then it's like, oh, well, the expansion's over, what are we doing now? And this is kind of how it was in Guild Wars 1, factions came out, you'd play it for 4 or 5 months, and then it'd be like, all right, well, I'll take a break, and then we'll wait for the next one. And this is kind of how their expansions work in general. You get that spike of player base, and then it will slowly drop off.
Well,
so
there's one other bit that should be noted. we also have to include before the expansion rolled out from 20 what was it? It was around February 2015 or March 20 somewhere.
Yeah, at the end of season 2, there was a massive gap of content.
So we had this huge drought right beforehand. We got basically a full season's worth of content in the form of an expansion. Because if you look at the expansion, break it out, technically your personal story steps would break down to about a good solid season of living world content.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
And
in fact, you could also go and say Living World Season 2 might take longer than the expansion to complete.
in some ways, yes. But then at that point you look at this and you go, but now it's been out for what is it, 6 months now?
Not almost. Well, 4 months at least. Yeah, because it came out late end of October. So it's actually it's probably 5 months today.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're looking at 5 months out. The
4 months.
4 or 5 months.
4 months.
Whichever.
Yeah.
We've had that, which places us nearly just the only things that we've gotten for Guild Wars 2 over the course of about a year, other than the holiday replays, and they've been just straight template drag and drop from the previous years with very minor updates, as in the weird shoulder skins that they added for both Halloween and Christmas. The only real changes that we've had in game consists of for almost a year now, is the expansion.
And cash shop items.
And of course, cash shop items.
Yes, and I completely agree with everything you guys said. I don't have much more input in terms of that, other than the fact that the draw for a lot of people in this game was the living world, the evolving world rather. It changes over time, progressively. Things might not be there later, like for instance Lion's Arch and all that jazz. And then on top of that, they had the holidays they were working on as well, which are pretty cool. So you had a pretty decent amount of a trickle of content, at the beginning, first year and a half, 2 years, and then you had just kind of like a drought. Like it was almost like a light switch. I don't know what happened with the development teams and all that jazz, but it just doesn't seem like they're developing a whole lot right now. I mean, they are behind the scenes, but they're not talking about it.
I guess, if you look at why they're not talking, I think they got a little bit burned when they talked about their roadmap a couple of years ago, and then when they didn't, like, for example, the Precursor Scavenger Hunt, there was a lot of data mining looking at books coming into it, and it didn't actually happen, and so people were always like, well, where is it? Where is it? It was data mined. Come on, you've got to be releasing it. And they're like, well, we're still working on it. And I think that when they talked about things like that and in their roadmap, and they didn't come out, people were like, well, you said it was in the roadmap, you told us, and where is it? And I think they got a little bit burned, and they understandably, that they are hesitant to say, all right, this is what we're working on, until it's actually done.
I believe that, I think it was on one of the guild talks, Colin Johansson actually said that and used the potato as a reference, like the cooked this is not the baked potato we were looking for, sort of thing.
Yep, the funny haha PR talk. We can't talk about it, but we'll make some really cheesy, awkward, clever joke to kind of make you go, yeah, that makes sense, but it will just kind of distract you in the time being. What I just linked, Micah, you don't have to do this whether or not whether you feel like it. I linked it in TeamSpeak.
Yeah.
I linked you the release of the Living World, kind of like a list of it. What you can do is just kind of scroll down. It shows at the very bottom, you can click Season 1, you can click Episodes, and then that'll expand.
Yeah, the content dates, I've seen this before, and it's like there's nothing for 2015, barely.
Nothing for 2015, and then you look at 2016, you got just kind of like the winter quarterly update, the big chunk one, which is like, okay, but what came with that was like little to nothing. It was awful. Like, I mean, and they hype.
Yeah, you got, you got. I'm just reading it. So you okay? They made the squad UI really good, which for me, the squad UI is amazing now. You know, the fact you can have lieutenants and they can plug markers all over the place, and not only that, we were doing it on Sunday. We were doing a guild rush, and it was the spider one in Dredgehaunt Cliffs, and it was very good because you could put squad markers down to actually show where to jump.
Yes.
And that was, that was fantastic. The central Tyria gliding, amazing. But these are all mechanics
and systems,
quality of life,
not content.
It's
fixes for issues that should have been. But what I'm getting at here is, so if you scroll all the way down to season 1, or even season 2 in certain areas, it gives you kind of a list. It shows you a date, like the title of the event. And it kind of gives you some lore there, which will hype you up for it, all right? That's pretty cool. But what happens is you click inside of it. This is where it gets pretty interesting. You get more lore. You get a hype video, a pretty cool video, highlights, interesting items. And then you get acts showing more progressive, like, for instance, for, like, holidays and stuff. So, but they really went into that detail with that. I got hyped up for this. Like every time they'd release one of these new, kind of like blogish posts, kind of to hype me up for the content, I'd be like, oh hell yeah, I'm getting back on Guild Wars. I'm getting ready for this.
Yeah.
Well,
scroll all the way up. You get Spirit Veil. PR Talk available this date. We'll extend it out. This is for Spirit Veil raid. And then you get legendary rewards, which aren't even available yet. Enhanced Squad UI, which wasn't available then either because it was broken. And then you got wallpapers and screenshots. Look at how cool this looks. But that's all. That's all. You don't have anything else at all. Anything. It says it doesn't have anything with the lore. It doesn't have anything to grab your attention. It's just, here's a raid. Here's what you can do. Period. Nothing else. And then you have, have like competitive, and then they have.
All right,
hold on, really quick.
We get the point. Go on.
This is the last one, and then you have a Mary's Winter's Day, which is a repeat, but they don't even title it something interesting. It's just special event. It's like,
yeah.
It's like why?
Well, the thing is, Winter's Day I'd like to bring up Winter's Day. First year's Winter's Day, the one that they started out with. Yes, there was not much rewards-wise. I'm going to go in that direction, but I'm going to say I enjoyed it 100% more. Yeah, the only thing I could get was some silly minis that I had to glue together myself, apparently, because you got magic glue and wad and frames. But it was crazy fun. It was ridiculous because to be able to put together said minis, you traveled from town to town. It changed almost all of the zone, like all of the starter home city zones a little bit. Made it that much more interesting to just wander around, see Tyria. Then they switched it so that it was Lion's Arch only. And that's kind of a little flaky and not so nice. Then it's now Divinity's Reach, because lore-wise, Divinity's Reach can pay for it somehow.
Yes.
And then all of the other news, fancy, neat things, they're also in Divinity's Reach. I get it. Humans, rich people, somehow magically they're able to just generate gold from somewhere. But why are you putting all of the events there? It's a pretty area, and Queen's Jubilee is fun, and that was kind of neat, and I get, okay, when the event comes to the human lands, let's put it over in this nice little area we set aside. But what happened to using, say, Lion's Arch for an event? Or, heck, Dragon Bash completely disappeared. That was one that they hyped. There was big songs behind it. It was fun. It was silly. Yeah. And it was a one-off. They killed...
But yeah, I mean, I think we are getting at that. It's a little bit off point because obviously, we're saying why are what is it that's not really making you wanted to play Guild Wars 2 right now? But I think that having some of those events, like I'd love to play the Queen's Jubilee. They could shove that back in for a couple of weeks. People would go and farm and do that, and it keeps the player base, sort of going on, and it allows them to farm a bit. It would actually balance the economy a little bit more
Well,
because people would be able to get lodestones, etc. That sort of thing. And these types of events, like you mentioned, Dragon Bash. How we had look at like the election where for between Ebon Nashblade and Ellen Kill. That was a really fun time, and Living World Season 1 I find brought a lot more fun things than Living World Season 2 did.
Yes,
well,
it did.
The only reason I was bringing up the holiday events in that regard was because they're feeling phoned in now. They were going to repeat the templates. That's fine. But they're repeating the templates, but they're now leaving the templates in one spot.
Yeah, I guess if you compare it to Guild Wars 1, like for example the Halloween event, every year they introduce new quests and they introduce some new content that brought in. Whereas I think Wooden Potatoes actually said this on a video of his. This was the very first year in all of Guild Wars history, because last year they introduced, so if we're talking 2014, they introduced the Bloody Prince. The 2015 Halloween was the very first year they didn't introduce a new lore or new content for Halloween. And that's going all the way back to Guild Wars 1. So we're talking 10 years. In the first time in 10 years, they didn't introduce any new content for Halloween.
Yes, and that is, that's also a sign of laziness, I feel, in terms of development side. It's like sure.
I will say that they did release Heart of Thorns the same week as Halloween in 2015. That may be their only sort of extenuating factor.
Maybe, but even so, like they could have done something, minor to make it a little bit more interesting. I mean, sure, the 2012 Halloween was probably one of the best holiday events in general, in my opinion, next to specific Winter's Day ones.
I like 2014 with the Bloody Prince.
Yep. 2014 was good too, but I felt 2012 was, I think, one of my favorite personally. But it was a mixture of the inclusion of these copy paste holiday templates mixed with other content, which was fantastic. And like Heart of Thorns was great, yes, in the initial release, but in the time of the release of the expansion pack, I felt we didn't know how little there was to it, if that makes sense.
Well, actually going on with the Halloween, one thing I'm kind of shocked at is they had the opportunity to be able to throw all they had to really do was go, okay, here's year one's story quests that we threw out around the world. Just have that thing again where we went and we tracked down the little guys to get the books.
Yeah, they didn't include that, and they didn't include any of the acts for like the story and stuff like that happened with it. They just kind of said, here's all of the content that we included, and here are a few doors in Lion's Arch that you can access them all at any time, which is fine.
And also here's a new shoulder thing. They added Night Fury and
Night Fury there.
Oh yeah, that's right. Another really grindy gold sink, which no one got because no one could afford it, because no one knew. I mean, I don't mind not knowing what it takes, but the fact that it required the amount that it took.
I like the fact that it was an unknown recipe.
Yeah, I like that. I like that too.
And then you've got obviously the Winter's Day copied suit, and you're going to have to say, well, is every event they're going to bring out a very grindy piece of gear? Something that's like Zero, because Zero actually got the shoulder piece for Winter's Day, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
I almost did too. I've got 95% of it done. I've got the only thing I don't have is the
drinks.
The drinks. I've got 6,000 done for the drinks out of 10,000 over time.
I've got like 400. That's it.
But no one's gonna sit there and if you actually did the math for the amount of gold it requires for 10,000 drinks, it's upwards to like almost 800 gold, I think, maybe a little bit more. So again, times our gold sink
or time sink. in my case, it was time sync.
Clicking.
I was doing many jumps through a puzzle.
Yeah, it's a time sink for those who have the time, and it's a gold sink for those who don't. That's basically what Guild Wars has become.
I will say it was, we look at the jumping puzzle at Winter's Day. You were doing something. You weren't just pressing F. It was kind of, it was fun. You were playing the game,
and that's why it was greatly enjoyable for the time that I was doing it. But I have no problems with that type of grind.
Yes, as long as it's fun and engaging.
I think that's the sort of thing the problem that Guild Wars 2 has right now is that a lot of the players are not enjoying playing the game because a lot of the main point of Guild Wars 2 is to actually get gold, to buy things, and the ways in which we get gold these days, they're just not fun, and a lot of the other things that made the game fun, like dungeons, like even fractals, doing the 4 fractals, even though it was time consuming, it was still more of an achievement because you're not doing swamp every single day. I think that ArenaNet have got to try and bring back some of the things, that made Guild Wars 2 great. What I'll say is that if you look at someone like Angry Joe, who reviewed Guild Wars 2 from launch. Now, Guild Wars 2 at launch wasn't perfect. It was, think of all the things they've brought in, things like the wardrobe system, looking for group wasn't even there at launch. And this game got a 10 out of 10 from Angry Joe. It was it was voted 90% for a lot of the time.
Yes.
What would you give Heart of Thorns as a release? You would no way near give it, anywhere near 9 out of 10. I don't even think you could give it an 8 out of 10. I think it's 7 out of 10 at best.
Yes.
And that has shown that the quality of Guild Wars 2 has dropped to a degree that, if you could say what were the major flaws, why was Guild Wars 2 Heart of Thorns not as good as Guild Wars 2's, core release? You could break it down to the fact that it was very content light, and as an expansion, it was a expansion light, in my opinion.
Actually, I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. The main reasons why I would say that our expectations were so much higher was the almost full year of hype that they shoved behind it.
Yes. Yeah.
Saying, this is going to be fantastic, everybody come in here, this is going to revolutionize our game. And what we ended up getting was what really felt like we got Season 3. Except, rather than Season 3 being broken up over the course of a long-term frame, we got Season 3 the same way that we get a season of a TV show in Netflix, where we got Season 3 all at once, all of a sudden, here it is. And by them just doing it as a hard dump like that, allowed people to kind of breeze through the content, because if you think about Season 1, as much as I love the hell out of Season 1, there was an entire 2 weeks that the only thing that you could do was mend signs and walk around to people and hand them their possessions that you picked up off the dirt. And the thing is, you tend to forget about that type of stuff when you look at it. When you look back at Flame and Frost, because you look back at Flame and Frost and you're like, there was that mini dungeon, and we got to fight those 2 guys.
Yeah, but the thing is, what made us think, oh yeah, that was okay. Like, there was issues, yes. But what made us okay with it was the fact that they kind of hyped it up a bit. They showed off what it was going to be, and that was okay. And it was what it was, and it was enjoyable because it was new content. It was engaging for, towards the end it was. They introduced Bram and, all that really cool, interesting, story with the world and Wayfarer Foothills, as you said earlier. And it just kind of made us spread out across the world more. Exploration was definitely something that was much more accepted, I feel.
Well,
Yeah.
in that same vein, I understand why the story can't do that much exploration for this, because if they went, oh, by the way, this is for Heart of Thorns players only, and it's in Corteria. It's kind of like the same sort of thing that we have going on whenever we do guild arena fights, where we go, all right, everybody get in the guild arena, and then half of our guys poke at it and go, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the expansion.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's fine. But I mean, compare the amount of time it took them to develop or create the initial map of Guild Wars 2. I mean, compare the sizes. I mean, you can scroll all the way out the map, and compare the amount that we got with Heart of Thorns. And
Yeah.
you can't say the same. You can't say that exploration was the same for the initial Guild Wars 2 and Heart of Thorns because of the lack thereof maps. So I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
you can't place a lot of the Heart of Thorns content in the original Guild Wars 2 game. Sure, that's fine, but look at all of the map. Like, look at all the map that they haven't tapped into. Like, I guess
Yeah.
lore-wise, that's fine, but they could have, expanded it a little bit more.
Yeah, and again, like we took Zero through Spirit Vale. Now, Spirit Vale, the bit what they've done, it's a very small sliver of map, but you were getting really excited at some of the different lore things that you
Oh,
uncovered,
yeah.
and this is a tiny bit of map. And this is something that ArenaNet could do. The map that the Spirit Vale isn't exactly a multi-leveled map, and that's again something I think they miss. Sort of, they're not understanding the fact that players just want new and interesting content. It doesn't matter if it's like Brisbane Wildlands, like it's a flat map, as long as it's got some nice, interesting, new lore for a lot of players. All right, people may not go back to that map as much because that is some of the issues they have with things like Fields of Ruin. How many players actually go back there right now? But it is there, it is new content. It allows players, I'm sure a map like that wouldn't take too long to create. And they could just shove it, create a new map, shove it in, be it on, as part of Mordramoth's area, the jungle, or maybe towards Ascalon, maybe towards the Norn, and give players, something exciting. Oh, it's a new map. Let's go and play that. New events, new challenges, a whole load of achievements for that new map.
Well,
But
there's
yeah, it's go on.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but there's one thing that we have to keep in mind. They pushed so hard on the gliders are awesome, gliders are great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And by doing so, it now has this feeling that in every map that we should be gliding somewhere. And
Yeah.
let's say they throw in a nice flat map. If they don't throw in jump pads, people are going to freak the heck out because it's going to be, well, I've got mastery in gliding, I should be gliding over there.
Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
that's not even a huge deal. Add a couple mountains. It's not
Yeah,
that big of an
exactly.
issue. You don't need to make it like verdant brink, tangled depths. Difficult to, I mean, in terms of height and verticality, you don't need to do that. You can add a flat map with a few mountains and some fun areas to glide. I mean, the entirety. You don't need to include
Or even structures,
yeah,
buildings, for
buildings,
Well,
yeah,
example.
actually,
towers.
in many ways, what it sounds like you're describing is Dragon Stand. When the map is actually open for all of 3 minutes after you beat a boss,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Yeah, it's a very flat map.
it's a very flat map. There's a couple of underpasses there, and it does have
And some
some
updrafts.
some updrafts that bring you a little higher. And there is the one floaty area where you actually do the primary dragon fight. But overall, that is a very flat map, and it feels much like the raid maps, which are technically very flat maps because they want to bring you down the corridor, so that you're going down the corridor, you're fighting what you need to fight, and you're while they allow you to go wander off for lore bits, which is fantastic. The They actually are like, okay, and now it's time to focus. It looks like it. I haven't been there to fight, but it looks like it's okay. Now it's time to focus up. Here's where you're fighting.
Yep. But what I meant to mean was, or meant to say was for the maps was not to have it like Dragon's Den. It's like, yeah, Dragon's Den is pretty cool, But it's like you said, it's comparative to the raid in which you're kind of led down a corridor. You're seeing what they want you to see. But what I mean was make it like the original maps in Guild Wars 2. Make them flat and expansive and, epic. I mean, so what you want to do is, if you're in like Vertebrink right now, look up to the sky. And what do you see?
Funky
you see
clouds.
Funky,
but
cloudy, foggy
vines,
vines. That's all you see, and that's all you're gonna get. Now, if you go to like somewhere like Keswick Hills, Gender Fields, or I'm sorry, Keswick Hills, yeah.
Gandharan Fields, yeah.
Fields, yeah. Queensdale, like really, really anywhere in the original maps, and you just kind of look around. Go to like Wayfarer Foothills, stand on a mountain and look around. And all you see is just like expansive world. It feels like you're in an expansive world. And it feels epic and it feels scaled. Everything feels like it's big. But in Vertebrink, it's like, I don't know if this was intentional, but it feels kind of like I'm boxed in. And it just feels like here's this box of content which you can only access through portals. And here you are. It's just like it doesn't feel as epic in scale.
Okay. Well, we've been talking for about an hour now, so let's sum up. In 60 seconds, what is it that basically you feel is, giving you a bit of lack of motivation to continue playing Guild Wars 2? And have you got anything that would, for you, would make you want to play it more?
I guess I'll start really quick. Yes, I feel like if ArenaNet stepped up their communication, primarily, if they talked more about what they will be releasing, they don't have to give, they don't have to spoil it. Just give some details, some lore, some hype. Have someone do that, then I will be like, yeah, sure, because that's what I got in the first few seasons was the hype for content, and I think that's really it, I guess, and then just like a steady trickle of content. Like that's really all I ask for. I don't need anything really other than that.
For me, I'm gonna go with steady trickle of content. I agree fully on that. And the other thing is going to sound a little out of place. On the Heart of Thorn maps, a larger cooldown, either a larger cooldown window or kind of like just a nothing time.
So once the meta reaches, like when you've got completed everything, that's when the meta event happens, yeah?
Well, let's pretty much like Dragon Stand. Dragon Stand, if everybody's doing perfectly and everything's going great, you're lucky you get like 20 minutes to be able to explore that map proper.
Makes sense. So like instance to kind of like channels like they had. I don't remember if Guild Wars 2 had that for channels and stuff like that.
Yeah, where it just leaves the map open for that little bit. Maybe it skips the next cycle of Dragon for that exact instance of the map. And allows people to actually explore the map and wander around and maybe have small events going on nearby or just NPCs having idle content. Like just going, hey, yeah, that was crazy, right? So something that actually makes it feel like I'm not on the full perpetual treadmill.
Yep.
I mean, in Verdant Brink, here we are, day-night cycle. Soon as the day's done, yes, you might get maybe 2 or 3 minutes in between the day and night cycle where you finished all the events for one of the pack factions and there's nothing going on there other than the adventures. But you've got... they only give you about 5 or so minutes, and then it's on to the night where Mordrum's coming back in force, everything's under attack and on fire. And there's these big massive fights up in the air, which you'll get access to for about maybe half the time.
Yep.
So that would be what you would, would keep you interested in playing.
Well, the thing is, if it was a little bit less go, a little bit more explore this world, go poke all of the things, because I kind of feel bad exploring these maps. I like these maps, I like going through them, but I know that when I am wandering around exploring, getting points of interest, getting hero points, all of that stuff, I am degrading everybody else on that map's experience.
Yes, and
I
also
am
it's stressful because you're stuck with the time limit.
exactly. I'm stressed for time. I know I'm ruining everybody else's day because everybody else is going, well, we want to get Chuck Garrett taken care of. We want to get this taken care of. And I go, and I'm sitting over here. Well, I want to pick the pretty flowers and go poke this thing because this NPC is saying something interesting. And I know that for every one person like me, that is one less person that they have towards the meta.
Yeah. And what I will say is, what, as for me, a content creator on YouTube, what would I want? Well, again, you want stuff that you can actually talk about, and it's stuff that that other people are interested in, and a new content obviously would be something that obviously a lot of people want, be it new maps or different world bosses, for example, just something new into the game. The actual structures of the game, like the mechanics, people aren't exactly interested in. It's not big hype news. And, again, just some information about when Living World Season 3 or, the next expansion. Just give us an idea, give us some story. Obviously, I don't think they'll be able to tell us, okay, where is it, what's it going to be focusing on, because that's what's going to be told to us about Living World Season 3, the end of that. But again, we haven't even touched the PvP or world versus world because that's a different thing. It's more about what is it keeping me playing, and why is it recently a lot of people are falling, and it is because of a lack of things to do in the game. Obviously, there are things that are available. Many different things are available, but a lot of things I think that they've lost with the introduction of Heart of Thorns that they could easily bring back. Things like dungeons would keep people going if they boosted up the reward by, even if they boosted it back up to like, 2/3 of what it was prior to Heart of Thorns, that sort of thing. Just keep people wanting to come back and play.
Yeah, and it's a matter of just having the content available, engaging. And like it's like, yeah, sure, there's all this stuff that we can do. Like it's like, sure, we can go and do dungeons and stuff because it's interesting content, it's fun. But at the same time, a lot of people bought the expansion pack and they want to get all these really cool weapons and gear, and they aren't able to because it requires so much time. And so that therefore takes their attention away from other parts of the game. So that's why it's just, in terms of nothing to do, it's just because there's just so much there's so little shallow content basically.
Yeah. No, this is coming from three players that really enjoy playing Guild Wars 2, and it's not the fact that we enjoy moaning, it's the fact that we really enjoy the game and want to see it, improve and be the game that it was prior to Heart of Thorns that kept us really keeping playing. And it'd be interesting to see, you everyone watching and listening, if you guys want to actually put any comments in the section, what is it that's, sort of keeping you playing right now? Is there anything that's sort of, making you guys actually feel negative about the game? What are your thoughts and impressions? What would you want to see? What do you think ArenaNet could do to improve? So a big thank you to JiggyJoe and also Xerokitsune for taking part in this. And hopefully we'll be back again. And again, if anybody else wants to take part in one of these discussion videos, please let me know and we can get you in our TeamSpeak and chat. But for now, guys, thank you very much for taking part. Any final thoughts?
I'm not really. I mean, we pretty much summed it up. Other than it's a matter of us as a community. Again, like what you said, we're not doing this to whine and moan. I mean, people like drama and like to talk about things, but we're doing this out of love of the game. We want to see improvements. We want to see what we love in the game become more of a thing more often. And I feel like as a community, we need to be more vocal about that. I mean, it's not just ArenaNet needs to talk more, but we need to express more of what we need in a more vocal manner. So, I mean, yep, I mean, talk in the comments section below and get a discussion going. I know personally I will be replying to any comments, kind of to keep the discussion going, to keep people more vocal. And I feel
Yep.
like, just
The only thing I'd have to add is out of all of the MMOs that I've played, and I've played a few, I still, even in its current state, love Guild Wars 2. And it's still my favorite MMO.
yes,
Cool.
I agree.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good place to end. So thank you very much for taking part, guys, and we'll see you on the next video.
Take it easy.
Take care.